There's a lot of talk about the voter ID laws.
Yes.
And we heard a lot about it in this last election.
Yeah.
And what do you think about the voter ID laws? Is there a problem with them?
Oh, absolutely. It's abysmal.
It's
abysmal. And it's amazing to me that to have come so far, to be very quickly headed back to where we came from is terrifying.
When you say headed back, what do you mean?
So, I mean, to go from, the Voting Rights Act in the 60s, I have a sister, my older sister was born around that time. She'd hate me if I exposed her real age, but she was born around that time, long enough to, around then to tell me, what it was like to grow up when legislation like that was implemented. My parents, the same thing, to now think that in my lifetime, we're still fighting some of those same battles. I think that it's cowardly for, Republican state houses and all of them, all state houses who have enacted voter ID laws since 2014 have been all Republican state houses.
Right.
And I think that it's cowardly for them to preach on one hand and feel so confident that their message resonates with Black and brown communities, with marginalized communities, and then enact legislation that further suppresses their ability to align with the people who they say that they feel so confident in aligning with. I think that anytime you limit access and equity, particularly in the United States of America, I think you've got to have a moral conversation with yourself.
If I'm thinking about this correctly, voter ID laws mean that you have to show an ID in order to vote, right?
Yes.
I don't understand what's the problem with that. What's wrong with because we have so many illegals here now. Mm-hmm. We have people coming into the country who are not citizens. What's wrong with, and especially with Black people, what's the problem with showing an ID in order to vote? How is that hurting them?
So I don't have an issue with needing to verify your identification, but I would just like it to be consistent across the board. Meaning there are certain states, I believe North Carolina was one of them, where at Texas, Louisiana, I can continue going on, where they have enacted laws where only certain specific pieces of identification are allowed and will be verified. So a state issue ID will not be, but a passport will be. A student ID card from the university that you attend will not be.
Is it difficult for college kids to get a state issued ID?
It is not, it is, I mean, I think difficult, you get into a gray area, right? Like difficult.
Yeah.
Is it easily accessed? Probably not as simple. I know what it's like to be a person who owns her own business and has to go to the DMV in Los Angeles, and I know I don't go to the DMV, I know I go to AAA.
Right, I go there too.
And you go to AAA for a reason, right?
Yeah.
Because the DMV and some of those social services, it's difficult for us to get the kind of service that we need that falls in line with the things that we have to do during the day. What my point about voter ID, what makes it so abysmal, is that it's like playing a game with equity and access to our rights. Voting is a right. So to create all of these different checks, to me, when addresses and identity can be easily verified, to me is just silly.
I've noticed, and I don't know if you're a Democrat or Republican, I have to assume a Democrat since you're a liberal, right? You tend to vote Democrat. Mm-hmm. I noticed that it's the Democrats who are always complaining about the voting ID mm-hmm. issue. And yeah, it's the Democrats' ID laws, but it's the Democrats who tend to get caught voting 2 and 3 times in different states, or voting for dead people, or voting for voting for crazy folks.
But I've never heard of those cases.
Yeah,
Could you
Ohio,
tell me?
I believe, one state that found a woman or caught some woman, black woman, who had voted like 2 or 3 different times in different states.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and, I don't know. I haven't heard about that, but the last couple cases of voter fraud that I did hear about that had to do with IDs and being registered in multiple cases were from 4 people within Trump's cabinet. So I haven't heard about any Democrats.
Yeah.
Though.
Do you you personally believe that a person should have to show an ID in order to vote, or should they be able to just walk in there and vote?
I think that people that you should have to verify your identity.
And how would you do that?
I think that's a tough question, because different states have different requirements for identification that they accept. I just don't think that government IDs should be, told. I don't know. I'm losing my train of thought.
Yeah, relax. You want some water? Yeah.
Thank you.
That's one beauty of
I don't think. Okay, here we go. I don't think that government IDs should be disqualified. I don't think that we should try to find alternative forms of identification when we have some already that are in place. Yeah. And furthermore, I don't think that there should be any changes to voter identification and the system thereof, because if you look at the numbers and the statistics and the occasions where there have been voter fraud or voter issues, it has not been because people walked up and tried to vote illegally. In fact, I think there were 2 cases during the campaign cycle in Texas, both of registered Republicans who did go in person and got arrested for trying to vote twice. So, yeah.
There is one thing that I think is a negative image of Black Americans, and I hear it in the media a lot, especially during voting season. They say that Black people should not have to show an ID in order to vote. And they say, well, because some Blacks, they can't get down to the DMV, or they can't do this or that. And it makes Black people seem dumb and kind of lazy and out of it to take away that responsibility. And I don't like that, because, Blacks are smart. They can take care of business. In Georgia, they would even, I believe it's Georgia, they would even go to your house and register you for an ID. What do you think about that image that they put out there about Blacks when it comes to voting? The ID, voting ID, voters ID.
Right. Well, firstly, I want to be very careful when talking about issues of equity and access, that we don't attribute false narratives to that. I think that is it true that marginalized and disenfranchised communities have difficulty adjusting their already tight schedules with all of their responsibilities to add another thing to their day, to go and wait in line at a social service place like the DMV?
Some cases they'll come to you.
If they can come to them, I think that that's a great thing.
Right.
But I think that we need to be careful in attributing things. Like I don't. When I hear narratives like you said, I don't attribute those to what I know to be Black America. That's not the Black America.
You hear the NAACP and others talking about Black folks, and that we shouldn't have to require them to go out and get an ID in order to vote. And so in some states, they made it easier so that the folks can go to you and register you to get an ID, and yet they didn't seem to like that. Are you embarrassed that Blacks are presented in that way?
I'm not embarrassed because I'm not embarrassed by that. I think do I reject narratives that I feel like do not accurately depict my people? Yes. Yeah. I do reject those narratives. But
No, go ahead.
But I don't. I think that when I hear the NAACP coming out and talking against people having to go get an additional ID, what I think they're specifically talking about are signing up for an actual ID card that is just for voting that they've created in some of these states as, again, another check, or a failed check to verify people's identity. And if you don't sign up in time before the election to get this specific voter card, then you're unable to vote. And that's what I was saying, where I feel like if you already have government issued ID, that should be just as fine to verify who you are instead of having to go a third or fourth step